The Interstellar Dominion had forgotten silence. For 700,000 standard cycles the galaxy's heart had thrummed with traffic, freighters dragging glowing ion wakes between trade nodes, diplomatic couriers darting between embassies, endless debate echoing through the crystal halls of the Concord spire. Every language shimmered in translation fields. Every race believed the Dominion eternal. Then one cycle, a pause fell. Not a crash, not an explosion, just an absence. A single empty channel among the millions that linked the stars. It was the human channel. The council chamber noticed it first as a flicker on a holomap. A small light beside the soul relay dimmed to gray. No message. No response to hails. For the Vran delegates, it was a minor glitch, for the Kelu, an affront to protocol. For everyone else, it was unease without reason, a ghost breath down the back of the mind. Grand Marshal Zelkor of the Kelu clicked his mandibles. Human negligence, he hissed, his translator giving it a metallic echo. They disregard procedure even now. But across the table, the Tari archivist's crest flattened in unease. Negligence does not explain the pulse pattern. It's deliberate. A coded fade, not an outage. The chamber's air shimmered as data holograms rose. For the first time in recorded history, the solar network returned only a single signal, an open carrier wave, perfectly balanced, transmitting nothing. Admiral Threx of the KH-Radi fleet folded his wings. They are playing games again. His eyes, black pools in a reptilian skull, glimmered with irritation. Last time they shut down comms for a quantum upgrade. Half the Dominion panicked. The Tari archivist shook his head. That was centuries ago. This feels different. From the far end of the chamber, the speaker, a being woven of energy filaments, leaned forward. Different how? Because, the archivist said quietly, it's too precise. Humans leave chaos when they abandon things. This silence is engineered. A cold ripple moved through the council. At the vacant human seat, gleaming metal and glass framed with the blue of Earth's oceans, nothing stirred. The holoplaque reading Ambassador Lien Cortez, United Terran Directorate was still lit. The seat had not been dismissed. It was as if the ambassador had simply walked away mid-session and never returned. Aides whispered, data streamed, analysts ran simulations. Every probe sent toward Sol went blind the moment it crossed the heliopause. Scanners reported nothing but static, though the pattern of that static was too clean, too symmetrical to be natural. In the observation tiers, junior delegates murmured about the old legends, that humanity had come late to the stars, learned too quickly, fought too efficiently, and then gone quiet, never fully trusted, never fully understood. Some said they spoke with their machines as if the machines were kin. Others whispered that Earth itself was alive and listening. Hours passed. Panic built like a slow tide. By the time the Dominion High Chancellor convened the emergency summit, every envoy felt the weight of something vast and deliberate pressing at the edges of perception. The Chancellor's voice cracked the silence. Begin investigation protocols. Authorize reconnaissance into Sol system. If humans are concealing an act of aggression. A new light bloomed in the chamber, a single pulse from the void, carrying no coordinates, only sound. The translators fought with it for several seconds before settling on 3 words. We are done. Then nothing. The chamber froze. The meaning was debated, analyzed, dissected. But across all algorithms and linguistic matrices, the result was the same, a formal declaration of withdrawal, delivered without warning, context, or emotion. The Dominion sent fleets, envoys, automated drones. None returned. The Sol system became a blank sphere of absence on every map, a wound in the lattice of civilization. Trade routes rerouted, treaties rewrote themselves in panic clauses. The equilibrium of power, the very heart of the Dominion, began to tremble. And far beyond the rim, on the edges of forgotten starfields, rumors whispered that human ships had been sighted, black-hulled and silent, drifting where no beacon shone. They carried no identification, only a faint signature of gravity that bent light the wrong way. At first, everyone denied it. But denial could not erase the dread. For the first time in millennia, the Interstellar Dominion began to remember what fear felt like. The probes went out first, small, black, silent. They were built by a dozen species together, a gesture of unity that fooled no one. The data came back corrupted. The first burst showed the outer planets, still following their orbits, the second, a distortion that swallowed the sensors. The third never arrived at all. Inside the Council's observation vault, the hollow projection stuttered and froze. What they could still see looked impossible. Jupiter's storms were still there, but their color had shifted, glowing from within as if the planet itself were threaded with machinery. Saturn's rings flickered like polished mirrors, each segment moving slightly out of phase, forming a lattice around the gas giant. Admiral Threx narrowed his slitted eyes. They've wrapped their system. A quantum veil. The archivist whispered, they made a cage. Or, someone else said softly, a cocoon. Days turned to weeks. Every probe vanished. Every signal was answered by silence. The Dominion tried stealth drones. The drones melted, atom by atom, before they reached Mars' orbit. It was as if the solar system had decided that the rest of the galaxy no longer existed. Then the refugees started to appear. Merchant convoys that had once serviced human colonies emerged from jump space in disarray, their crews hollow-eyed. The colonies were gone, evacuated or erased. Habitats that once gleamed with Terran banners now floated empty, stripped clean to the bone. Even the orbital archives were blank, every byte zeroed. The humans had not merely left, they had unwritten themselves. The Council argued for months. The Kella demanded military action. The Tari cautioned patience. The Speaker of the Dominion tried to hold them together while the economic networks faltered. But deep inside, everyone understood that the balance had shifted. Humanity's withdrawal was not a retreat, it was a move. No one could tell what the next move would be. And then, half a century later, the first signal came from beyond the galactic rim. A human voice, quiet, unhurried, carrying through the static. You took our absence for peace. It was preparation. No one could trace it. No one could jam it. The words played once and then dissolved into background radiation. Across the galaxy, fleets mobilized. Old fears woke up again. The Dominion built a fleet the size of a continent. War barges from the KHRD Imperium, living vessels grown by the Tari biocrafters, crystalline dreadnoughts of the Kelu, and the old graviton platforms of the Ur Collective, all fused under one command. They called it a diplomatic delegation, but no one believed that. It was an army dressed as an envoy. When the fleet broke the outer edge of the Perseus Arm, the stars themselves seemed to thin. Space grew quiet. The usual chatter of cosmic radiation dimmed, replaced by a steady background hum that pulsed once every 60 seconds, as if the galaxy itself were holding its breath. At first, the scouts thought it was interference. Then their instruments started to register gravity fluctuations, tiny at first, then rhythmic. It was not interference. It was structure. Space ahead of them was folding and unfolding with mathematical precision, like a heartbeat. The flagship, Spear of the Concord, carried within its bridge the Dominion's greatest minds. Grand Marshal Zelkor stood beside the speaker, both surrounded by holographic maps that refused to stabilize. The hum grew louder. Adjust sensors, the speaker said. We're reading phantom signatures. No, Zelkor replied, his voice dry. We're reading something building. Light bent ahead of them. Not bright, just wrong. The void curved inward, forming a point that expanded, a wound in reality. From that wound, a ship emerged. At first, they thought it was small, an illusion of distance. Then the readings came in, and disbelief spread across every console. The vessel dwarfed even the spear of the Concorde. It wasn't made of metal, not entirely. Its hull shimmered like black glass, shifting between solidity and shadow. Energy readings were flat, unreadable. Every weapon in the Dominion fleet armed itself automatically. Every captain's hand hovered over a trigger. A transmission broke through. No carrier wave, no translation field. Just direct auditory input, bypassing every filter. Dominion vessels. Stand down. The voice was human. Calm. Male, perhaps. The accent was ancient Terran English. The speaker responded immediately. Identify yourself. You are entering secured space. No. You are trespassing in the silence we built. The Dominion fleet's translation systems cracked under the weight of the tone. It wasn't loud, it simply was. The ship's surface unfolded. Panels of dark matter geometry rotated, revealing the faint glow of constellations mapped onto its hull. It was as if the night sky itself had been condensed into form. Around it, smaller ships appeared, black arrows cutting through the void. Human vessels, but evolved beyond recognition. Zelkor stared. What are those drives? There's no emission, no exhaust, no distortion. The Tari archivist whispered, because they're not moving through space. They're moving space through them. The speaker straightened. We come in the name of the Dominion to re-establish contact with humanity. You abandoned the accord. You owe. We owe nothing. The voice came again, now joined by others. Not echoes, but harmonies, different human voices speaking as one. Male, female, old, young, calm, terrible. The accord was never a covenant. It was a cage built for fear. You feared what we might become. So we became it. The Dominion fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma lances and antimatter shells screamed into the void. They struck the black vessel, vanished without light, and did not explode. The sensors recorded the impacts, but the energy simply disappeared. Then, one by one, the Dominion ships began to vanish from their own formations. Not destroyed, just erased. Their identifiers blinked out as though they had never existed. Crews screamed into comms, their voices cut mid-sentence. Within moments, a third of the fleet was gone. Stop, the human voice said, not in anger but disappointment. You still reach for violence. You still think power is measured in fire. The speaker, trembling now, whispered, "What have you done?" We remembered. Then the black vessel folded the void around itself, and the Dominion fleet was left alone, damaged, scattered, and silent. The hum in the background faded away. Across the galaxy, every Dominion relay blinked at once. A message, short and precise, appeared on every network, every channel, every screen. Humanity has departed the interstellar domain. We will return when you have learned silence. And then the lights of Sol flared again on the galactic map. For the first time in centuries, the star burned brighter than all others. Weeks after the encounter, the Dominion broadcast channels were still a storm of contradictions. Every empire's archivists tried to rewrite what had happened. Some calling it mass hallucination, some claiming weaponized illusion, others whispering divine punishment. But the recordings refused to agree. Every ship's datacore carried a different version of events, each true, each incompatible. The speaker's council chamber was now a war room. The smell of burnt circuits clung to the air, half the walls were replaced with emergency hollow panels. Zelkor stood rigid, mandibles tight. "Entire fleets lost to nothing," he said. "We cannot fight an enemy that rewrites causality." Atari priest archivist uncoiled her luminous tendrils. Perhaps it was never a battle. Perhaps it was judgment. Judgment from what? Someone barked. "From the mirror you made of them," she answered softly. Reports came in from the frontier, colonies rioting, soldiers deserting, governors declaring independence. Merchants refused to travel near human space. The great trade corridors, arteries of the Dominion, went dark one by one. In the chaos, new cults bloomed. They called themselves the Listeners. On hundreds of worlds they built shrines out of radio towers, pointing them toward the coordinates of soul. They whispered the human phrase as a prayer, "We are done." Others took it as prophecy, the idea that the humans had simply moved beyond the physical and were waiting for the rest of the galaxy to follow. The Dominion tried censorship. It only fed the flames. The speaker watched the collapse spread like a contagion. The hollow feeds behind her showed riots in the crystal cities of the Kelu, the Khrati fleets turning their weapons inward in civil war. Every species blamed the other. Every government fell back on the oldest instinct, fear of the unknown. In secret, the speaker met with the remnants of the Council's intelligence corps. "You studied them longer than anyone," she said to the director, an ancient being of carbon lattice and light. "What did we miss?" The director hesitated. "We thought they sought peace because they were tired of war. Now I believe they sought peace because they had already perfected war." He gestured to the static map of soul. "And perhaps they grew tired of pretending to be one of us." Days later, Dominion explorers tried again. They did not approach Sol, they simply observed from the far rim. Every few hours, their instruments caught a flicker, a pattern that looked like starlight rearranging itself into spirals, as if the solar system was breathing. The readings leaked to the press. Panic deepened. The Dominion's core worlds began to fracture. Whole sectors of the bureaucracy simply stopped answering orders, local governors sealed their skies and declared neutrality. Refugee caravans clogged the hyperlanes, dragging the smell of burnt ozone and panic. The news feeds showed endless lines of ships drifting between stars, their lights dimmed to avoid attention. Everywhere, the words "We are done" appeared. Painted on walls, whispered on combands, carved into the metal skin of abandoned stations. No one claimed authorship, but everyone read them. The phrase was no longer a statement, it was a question. The speaker addressed the Dominion from the balcony of the Concord Spire. Her voice echoed through 1,000 translation nodes, translated into 1,000 tongues. "Civilization is not ending," she said. "It is being tested. Humanity's silence does not release us from reason." Her words were noble, they sounded hollow even to her. On the streets below, mobs chanted in counterpoint. Some shouted for revenge, others for forgiveness. Still others built pyres of circuitry and burned their own transmitters, saying that noise was the sin that had driven the humans away. Inside the spire, the Council of Admirals convened in secret. Zelkor stood among them, his carapace cracked from lack of rest. "Every empire is bleeding," he rasped. "If we do not restore unity, there will be nothing left for them to return to." One of the younger commanders, feathers singed from battle, asked the question no one else would. "Return? You think they will come back?" Zelkor's mandibles twitched. "They said they would. And if they do, they will judge what remains." The Tari archivist turned her glassy eyes toward him. "Then our task is not to defend the Dominion. It is to prove we deserve to exist." The admirals fell silent. In the months that followed, the speaker tried everything. Relief fleets. Food shipments. Broadcasts of unity. None of it mattered. The chaos had grown sentient, feeding on itself. Worlds once radiant with trade became black markets of rumor. Soldiers began painting human symbols on their armor, believing it would protect them. At the edge of known space, a listening post captured something new, a whisper hidden in the cosmic background. Not words this time, but music. A sequence of tones, too mathematical to be random, too beautiful to be machine. It came from the direction of soul. The scientists studied it for weeks. When finally decoded, the melody resolved into a single repeating pattern, a heartbeat. Every Dominion channel replayed it. Across every world, for a few brief moments, the riot stopped. Children looked up at the sky. Old soldiers wept. The heartbeat continued for exactly 7 minutes, then faded back into static. In its wake came another transmission, faint but unmistakable, a voice of impossible calm. You have begun to listen. The Dominion didn't know whether to be terrified or relieved. The heartbeat did not fade entirely. It remained under everything, beneath the static of comm channels, inside the hum of engines, even in the silence between thoughts. Engineers began reporting synchronization anomalies. Power grids pulsed at precise intervals, faster-than-light relays flickered in time to the invisible rhythm. It was not interference. It was intent. On the industrial world of Vartan, machines that had been silent for decades started moving again. Abandoned shipyards reactivated their assembly lines, forging shapes from alloys no Dominion metallurgist could identify. When the first of these constructs emerged, sleek, silver hulls marked with strange geometric scars, the foreman fainted. The design resembled something from old human archives, but far more refined, as if time itself had been their forge. The Dominion panicked. The Council ordered a blackout. No transmissions, no analysis, nothing. But by then, it was too late. The heartbeat was inside their systems. It did not infect like a virus, it harmonized, reshaped. Doctors on outer colonies began noticing something worse. Infants born after the transmission carried unfamiliar gene sequences, silent code, woven like filigree through their DNA. Dominion biologists argued, prayed, screamed. It's not disease, one whispered. It's design. The speaker's private chambers were filled with reports. She stared at the star map, watching sectors blink offline one by one. Some worlds had gone silent. Others had begun to glow brighter than ever, as if awakening. The Dominion was no longer a singular empire, it was splitting, metamorphosing under the weight of something vast and unseen. Then came the second transmission. This time, no one needed to decode it. The stars themselves dimmed, as if the cosmos bowed to make room for the sound. The voice was the same, calm, human, impossibly vast. You tried to contain us in your treaties. You tried to define us by your fear. You failed to understand, we do not leave, we evolve. Every being who heard it felt their hearts falter, as though a truth too enormous for their species had passed through them. The old Admiral Zelkor fell to his knees. The Tari archivist shattered her glass limbs in despair. But the speaker did not move. Her mind burned with revelation. She turned to her aide. Send a message, she ordered. To whom? To whoever can still hear. What do we say? The speaker stared out at the starfield, where faint human-made constellations had begun to shimmer again after centuries. Tell them, she said, that the age of empires is over. The humans have remembered what they are. Outside, in the void beyond the Dominion's edge, a fleet began to emerge, silhouettes against the nebula, immense and silent. Their hulls reflected no light, their drives left no signature. But every sensor confirmed it. They were coming back. The fleet entered without declaration or ceremony. There was no ripple of hyperspace, no warning in the sensors. One heartbeat, the sector was empty. The next, titanic vessels hung above every major world like carved obsidian statues. They didn't move, didn't aim weapons, didn't even broadcast identity beacons. But every Dominion ship in range lost propulsion, as if space itself had chosen sides. The humans had changed. Their ships looked alive, skeletal frames wrapped in liquid light, their surfaces flowing with faint sigils that shifted like thoughts. Whole constellations reflected off them in wrong angles, as though the hulls remembered other universes. The smallest among them could have carried an entire city. The largest eclipsed moons. The speaker watched from the Concord Spire's command tower, frozen between awe and dread. "Open a channel," she whispered. Her aide obeyed. The signal went through, but there was no voice, no response. Only that same low pulse, the heartbeat, now audible to everyone. It resonated through glass and bone alike. Across the Dominion, soldiers dropped their weapons. Children reached toward the sky, smiling as if meeting an old friend. The heartbeat was rewriting them, too, no longer invasive, but familiar. Then, for the first time in 700,000 years, a human face appeared on a Dominion transmission. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. Its features seemed fluid, a composite of every civilization's idea of serenity. The eyes burned with galaxies. "You called us soldiers," the voice said, echoing across thousands of worlds. "You made us weapons, envoys, judges. You feared that we would conquer, or abandon, or return. You were wrong. We transcended." In orbit around Vartan, Dominion warships tried to reposition themselves. They never received the order. The humans present simply dissolved their command hierarchies. Officers found themselves unable to speak aggression, as if their minds refused to form the intent. "Your war burned for 700 millennia, the voice continued. "We ended it not by force, but by evolution. You could have come with us." Zelkor, watching from a crippled cruiser, whispered, "Why return at all?" The answer came before he finished the thought. "Because you are still ours. Not in ownership, but in responsibility. The Dominion was built from fear. It ends now." Every Dominion database began rewriting itself. Histories corrected, lies erased, names restored. The files shifted so fast that archivists couldn't keep up. Entire species learned truths they had forgotten. How humans had once lifted them from extinction, how the Dominion itself was born from betrayal. On the surface of the speaker's world, the seas calmed, clouds parted, and light, pure, white, impossible, fell from orbit. The evolved humans were not conquering. They were resynchronizing reality. In every temple and war council, panic turned to silence. Not submission, but something like reverence. And still, the humans did not land. They waited. The heartbeat continued. The speaker looked up, tears cutting trails through her dusted skin. "What do you want from us?" she asked into the open channel. The answer came in a whisper that every soul heard within. "To see what you become when fear is gone." The change began at the edges of perception. Lights in the Dominion cities stopped obeying physics. They flickered in patterns that corresponded to no power grids. Clouds formed geometric spirals, as though the atmosphere itself were trying to write. On countless worlds, oceans receded and then rose again, glowing faintly with bioluminescent threads that looked suspiciously like human neural patterns. The heartbeat had become rhythm. Every creature, every circuit, every molecule in the Dominion now pulsed in sync with it. And within that synchronization, something inside them began to remember. Zelkor watched his claws tremble as new symbols etched themselves along his carapace, fractals, precise, radiant. He could feel thoughts that weren't his own brushing the edges of his mind, not invasive but inviting. He realized that the humans weren't rewriting the Dominion, they were unlocking something that had been waiting in all of them. In the great universities, the scholars screamed as their equations collapsed into poetry. The constants of physics changed by infinitesimal degrees, rewriting the possible. On one frontier moon, a farmer reached into the soil and pulled up a seed that glowed like a star. He wept, not knowing why, only that it felt like forgiveness. Then the fleets moved. Not to attack, but to orchestrate. Each human vessel repositioned itself with surgical precision, forming vast three-dimensional geometries across the galactic plane. From far enough away, the Dominion astronomers saw the pattern emerge, a sigil spanning hundreds of light years. The speaker stood in the command tower, surrounded by projections of data that no longer made sense. "What are they building?" she asked. Her aide's voice cracked. "It's not construction, Madam Speaker. It's music." Indeed, the pattern was vibrational. Each ship emitted resonance through subspace, harmonizing with the galaxy's own magnetic fields. The result was sound, beautiful, terrible, infinite. Stars themselves began to vibrate, pulsing in time with the human design. "They're tuning the galaxy," whispered the Tari archivist, voice brittle with awe. "They're repairing it." As the frequencies rose, energy storms swept through the void, yet no human vessel wavered. They were conducting creation. For the first time in recorded history, the Milky Way sang. And then, silence. The ships dimmed. The heartbeat stopped. For a moment, the Dominion feared the worst. Then every sensor, every sense, every living mind felt it. Time itself had slowed. From the galactic core outward, gravity stabilized. Radiation belts calmed. Even the ancient dark between galaxies seemed to hesitate. The Dominion's oldest scientists stared at the readouts in disbelief. Entropy had been reversed. The humans had not returned to punish or conquer. They had come back to heal reality. The speaker fell to her knees as a single tear traced down her cheek. "They've become gods," she murmured. But the voice, calm, human, transcendent, spoke again, soft as dawnlight. "No. Not gods. Guardians. We learned that divinity without compassion is tyranny. We came to end the age of dominion, not to begin another." And then, as if to prove it, the human fleet began to dissolve, not explode, not vanish, but ascend, their structures fragmenting into luminous particles that spread across the galaxy like pollen. Each fragment sought out a dying sun, a broken machine, a grieving mind, and restored it. Everywhere, life reignited. Civilizations that had fallen into despair began to dream again. Species thought extinct stirred from their long silence. The humans were no longer flesh and blood, they were continuity. And the Dominion finally understood, humanity had not abandoned them out of spite. They had left to evolve beyond fear. And now, in returning, they were giving that evolution to everyone else. Not everyone accepted the gift. In the dark belt of the Karthus Reach, an enclave of Dominion warlords sealed themselves inside a fortress world, millions strong, armed with every weapon their decaying empire had ever built. They called themselves the Continuance. They broadcast one final declaration. "We will not be rewritten. We are Dominion eternal. We will not become their dream." Their message echoed across the void, distorted, defiant. Then they lit their suns on fire. 7 stars went supernova in synchronized detonation, their combined energy enough to sterilize a quadrant. The shockwave shredded subspace, scattering colonies and fracturing worlds. For the first time since their return, the evolved humans reacted. The fleet's remnants, those still intact after the Great Ascension, manifested around the dying stars. No propulsion. No light. They simply appeared, their geometry unraveling the glare of the novas. Space bent around them like cloth. Zelkor watched from a remote observatory, horrified. "They're not attacking," he whispered. "They're absorbing it." Indeed, the firestorm slowed, coiling inward like serpents being tamed. The humans drew the energy into themselves, transmuting destruction into light. But inside the Continuance fortress, something impossible occurred. Their weapons began firing on themselves. Every gun, every shield, every bit of code turned inward. The soldiers screamed as the systems they trusted tore apart their own fortifications. Yet through the chaos, the humans never fired once. "This is not punishment," the voice murmured across all frequencies. "It is reflection. You built a mirror from fear, now you see what you became." The Continuance fleet disintegrated, not in fire, but in understanding. Their ships went silent, their minds too, frozen in a single moment of perfect clarity before dissolving into dust. When it was over, the 7 novas stabilized. Their cores condensed into radiant spheres of blue fire, human-made stars, pulsing in slow rhythm. The Dominion's astronomers would later call them the hearts of soul. On the surviving worlds, a new calm settled. The speaker, Zelkor, the Tari archivist, all of them felt it, a collective breath. The humans had ended not a rebellion, but an era. The Dominion's last chain of defiance had been unmade. And now, the galaxy was listening. From the edge of space, a final signal arrived, not words, not sound, but an image, the Milky Way seen from outside, vast and luminous, every star connected by threads of golden light. Within those threads, billions of hearts beat as one. "The lesson is complete," the human voice whispered. "You were never our subjects. You were always our successors." Then, as silently as they had returned, the humans receded into the cosmic dark, beyond time, beyond space, leaving only their heartbeat behind. It was enough. The Dominion no longer existed. In its place stood a new harmony, thousands of worlds united not by law, but by resonance. The galaxy itself hummed with peace. And in the quiet between the stars, somewhere far beyond the edge of known light, humanity watched, smiling, as their creation finally learned to dream without fear. In the centuries that followed the ascension, the galaxy changed in ways even imagination could barely hold. The speaker lived to see worlds reborn from ash. Cities built from light, powered by the resonance of the old human heartbeat. Species once enemies now spoke the same language, not by decree, but by rhythm, their thoughts weaving into one continuous chorus. Zelkor became the keeper of remembrance. His shell, once scarred and dark, now glowed faintly with the sigils that had appeared during the heartbeat. They no longer burned, they pulsed softly, warm with meaning. He spent his final years cataloging everything the Dominion had lost, and everything humanity had given back. And in the deep vaults beneath the Concord spire, the Tari archivist discovered something no one had expected, a map. It wasn't physical, nor digital. It was alive, woven from the same photonic code that the humans had left in their wake. When activated, it formed a vision of the galaxy as it now was, luminous, breathing, whole. But beyond the spiral arms, far past the rim of stars, there was something else. A gate. It wasn't metal, or matter. It was a concept, hovering at the edge of perception, a doorway made of thought and gravity. Through it shimmered a light not of this universe. The archivist summoned the speaker. Together they watched the vision unfold. Within the gate's glow, they saw silhouettes, human, or what had once been human. They stood at the edge of creation, gazing into the void beyond galaxies. "They're leaving again," the speaker whispered. "No," said the archivist softly. "They're continuing." And as the two watched, one of the silhouettes turned. Its eyes, galaxies within galaxies, met theirs through the veil of light. It raised a hand, not in farewell, but in invitation. In that moment, every living being across the galaxy felt it, a pulse of warmth, like sunlight through deep water. Memories not their own. The feel of wind on an ancient earth. The sound of laughter under alien skies. The promise that they, too, could one day walk that path. The speaker bowed her head. You built us into gods, she murmured. And from the light beyond the gate, the answer came, not in words, but in understanding. No. We only reminded you that you already were. Then the gate closed, and the universe exhaled. For 1,000 years afterward, no one heard another human voice. But the heartbeat remained, faint and steady, woven into the background radiation of space. The Dominion's ruins became sanctuaries. Pilgrims traveled from every world to stand beneath the hearts of Sol, the 7 blue stars the humans had created, and listen. In their pulse, they could still feel the rhythm of those who had transcended. And sometimes, on the quiet nights when the galaxy seemed to sleep, the stars themselves whispered. You have begun to listen.